All the women fell for the Korean Mafia boss in his restaurant, except the black waitress he really wanted. The Golden Phoenix wasn't just a restaurant, it was a temple of power disguised as fine dining. Crystal chandeliers cast amber light over white tablecloths where Seoul's elite gathered to see and be seen. The air hummed with hushed negotiations, champagne wishes, and the quiet desperation of beautiful women competing for the attention of one man. Jim Park sat at his corner table, ink-dark tattoos creeping from beneath his crisp white collar, a dragon's tail visible on his neck. His presence commanded the room without effort. One glance from those calculating eyes could summon staff or silence conversation. Women in designer dresses lingered near his table, their laughter too bright, their interest too obvious, each hoping to be the one chosen by Seoul's most dangerous restaurateur. He barely noticed them anymore. Power had become routine, attention exhausting. Then there was Sarah Johnson. 4 months serving his tables, and she still hadn't looked at him as anything more than a customer requiring excellent service. She moved through the dining room like a dancer, graceful, precise, untouchable. Her professional smile never faltered, her posture impeccable, her eyes focused but never flirtatious, never afraid, just indifferent. That indifference haunted him. Jim Park had memorized the rhythm of her movements months ago, the way Sarah Johnson carried 3 plates balanced along her left arm like they weighed nothing, her right hand free to adjust water glasses with surgical precision. How her spine stayed perfectly straight even when she leaned forward to describe the evening specials, voice warm but measured, professional without being servile. She never rushed, never fumbled, never let the mask slip to reveal whatever thoughts moved behind those careful eyes. 4 months, 16 weeks of watching her glide through the Golden Phoenix's dining room like she owned the space, though they both knew she was just passing through on her way to something else, something better than serving overpriced Hanwoo beef to people who barely tasted it. Tonight, the usual procession of women had already begun. Designer dresses in jewel tones, perfume that announced their presence 3 tables away, laughter pitched just loud enough to reach his corner. They ordered champagne they didn't finish, and appetizers they rearranged on their plates, all while stealing glances at his table, waiting for an invitation that never came. Their desperation had become white noise, as meaningless as the carefully curated jazz flowing through hidden speakers. But Sarah moved through the performance with focused indifference, attending to her tables with equal care, whether they were foreign diplomats or young couples stretching their budget for an anniversary. She treated everyone with the same practiced courtesy, including him on the rare occasions their paths crossed. A slight nod, a murmured, "Good evening, Mr. Park." Nothing more. The dragon tattoo on his neck pulsed with his heartbeat as he made his decision. He caught his floor manager's eye, gestured subtly. Within moments, his usual corner table sat empty while staff scrambled to prepare a table in Sarah's section. Confusion rippled through the restaurant. Regulars noticed. The women at the bar exchanged sharp glances. Something had shifted in the careful ecosystem of the Golden Phoenix. Sarah approached his new table with the same composed grace, order pad ready, expression neutral. If she was surprised, she didn't show it. "Good evening, Mr. Park. Welcome to my section." Her voice carried the faintest trace of southern warmth buried beneath professional polish, like honey crystallized into something harder, more durable. "Good evening." He studied her face, searching for some reaction. Nothing. "I'll start with the appetizer tasting menu. Paced slowly." "Of course. Any preferences I should note?" "Surprise me. I trust your judgment." Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or suspicion. "The kitchen's judgment," she corrected gently. "I simply deliver what they create." But they both knew she was lying. He'd watched her guide uncertain diners, steer tourists away from dishes that wouldn't suit them, transform service into an art form. She knew food, knew people, knew exactly what she was doing in every moment. "Even so," he said quietly, "I trust yours." Sarah held his gaze for precisely 2 seconds, long enough to acknowledge the compliment, not long enough to accept it. "I'll put your order in immediately, Mr. Park." She turned away, posture perfect, that controlled smile still in place. But Jim noticed the slight tension in her shoulders, the barely perceptible shift in her rhythm. He'd disrupted her careful equilibrium, and for the first time in months, he felt something other than the hollow ache of power, without purpose.
Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. I have missed you all. Missed all the experiences we've had together. It's been a rough ride, but trust me, we're getting everything back and running. So stick around. I need your support on YouTube now more than ever. Thank you especially for sticking around to this very moment. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now, back to the story.
By the third night, the entire staff understood that something had changed. Jim Park no longer occupied his corner table with its strategic view of both the entrance and the kitchen. Instead, he sat in Sarah's section, always requesting the same small table near the window that required her to pass him each time she moved between kitchen and dining room. The hostess began seating him automatically. The sommelier learned to wait for Sarah to present the wine list. Even the kitchen adjusted its timing, somehow sensing that these meals required a slower pace, more opportunities for interaction. "The halibut tonight," Sarah said on the 5th night, her notepad ready. "The chef recommends it with the citrus beurre blanc." "You've never steered me wrong." Jim closed his menu without looking at it. "What would you order if you were dining here?" Her pen paused fractionally. "I don't eat here, Mr. Park." "Hypothetically?" "Hypothetically, I'd choose the braised short rib. It's underrated. People overlook it for flashier dishes, but it's perfectly executed." She met his eyes briefly. Substance over spectacle. He smiled. Small. Genuine. "Then that's what I'll have." The whispers started in the service station, spread to the kitchen, metastasized in the staff locker room. Why Sarah? What made her different from the rotating cast of beautiful women who'd tried and failed to hold his attention? The theories ranged from professional jealousy to darker speculation about what she might be doing to deserve such focused interest. Sarah felt the shift in how her colleagues looked at her. The chef's questions about her orders carried an edge now. The other servers stopped including her in break-room conversations, but she maintained her rhythm, her professionalism, her careful distance from the chaos orbiting around table 7. The women noticed too. Designer clutches snapped shut with unnecessary force. Champagne orders became increasingly expensive, as if price alone could reclaim lost ground. One regular, an actress with perfect cheekbones and generations of old money, requested Sarah's section specifically just to watch her work, eyes tracking every interaction with predatory focus. "Is there something wrong with your Dover sole?" Sarah asked, noting the barely touched plate. "It's fine." The woman's smile was sharp enough to cut. "I'm just fascinated by your technique. You must have made quite an impression." Sarah cleared the plate without reaction. "I strive to provide excellent service to all our guests." "I'm sure you do." On the 11th night, Jim left an envelope beneath his napkin. Sarah discovered it while clearing, the weight of it immediately wrong. She opened it in the service station, away from curious eyes, and felt her stomach drop. 500,000 won, nearly a week's wages for 30 seconds of placing a plate. She found him by the coat check, the envelope held between 2 fingers like evidence. "I can't accept this." He turned, non-surprised. "Why not?" "Because it's not a tip. Tips reflect service. This," she gestured with the envelope, "this is something else." "Recognition of excellence, then." "Mr. Park," her voice stayed level, but something fierce moved behind it. I serve you the same way I serve everyone. If you want to tip well, that's generous, but this makes me feel purchased." The word hung between them, sharp and honest. Jim studied her face, seeing not offense but dignity, self-possession that couldn't be bought or flattered away. "You're right." He took the envelope, removed 400,000 won, handed back 100. "Is this acceptable?" Sarah looked at the reduced amount, still generous, now appropriate. She took it with a slight nod. "Thank you for understanding." As she walked away, Jim realized he'd just been taught a lesson about boundaries by someone who served his tables, and somehow that made him want to know her even more.
The businessman had come from dinner elsewhere, already drunk on expensive whiskey and his own importance. Three-piece suit, gold cufflinks, the casual arrogance of men who believed money excused behavior. He'd been loud all evening, but Jim hadn't intervened. Sarah could handle difficult customers. He'd watched her deflect advances with professional grace a dozen times. But then the man caught her wrist as she set down his water glass. "Where'd they import you from?" His words slurred together, loud enough to carry to nearby tables. "Atlanta? Nairobi?" He grinned at his own wit. Park must love collecting exotic pieces for his restaurant. Sarah's face remained perfectly composed, but Jim saw her fingers tighten fractionally on the water pitcher. "Sir, I need my hand to serve you." "I bet you need those hands for lots of things." The businessman's companions laughed nervously, sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure, but too drunk to care. Jim was moving before conscious thought, crossing the dining room with predatory efficiency. His hand landed on the businessman's shoulder, not hard, just present. When he spoke, his voice carried the kind of softness that preceded violence. "You're going to release her, apologize, and leave." The businessman's face went pale as he recognized who stood behind him. His hand dropped from Sarah's wrist like she'd burned him. "Mr. Park, I was just—" "Now." The word cut through the remaining alcohol fog. The businessman stammered an apology Sarah didn't acknowledge, threw cash on the table, and fled with his companions scrambling behind him. The dining room's suspended animation resumed slowly, conversations rebuilding around the gap his departure left. Jim turned to find Sarah already walking away, back straight, pitcher still in hand. He followed her down the service stairs to the wine cellar, where the temperature dropped 20 degrees and the only sound was the hum of climate control. "You didn't need me to do that." She set the pitcher down with controlled force, finally turning to face him. Her composure had fractured slightly, anger showing through the cracks. "I've handled worse since I started working restaurants at 16. "I know you have." Jim leaned against the wine rack, giving her space. "That wasn't about you." "Then what was it about?" "My boundaries." The dragon on his neck seemed darker in the cellar's dim light. "Some things aren't tolerated in my restaurant." "Your restaurant?" Sarah's laugh was short, bitter. "Is that what this is about? Territory? Protecting your investment?" The accusation landed hard. "Is that what you think?" "I don't know what to think, Mr. Park." She crossed her arms, defensive but not defeated. "You sit in my section every night. You leave generous tips, you chase away rude customers, and now everyone thinks I'm either sleeping with you or about to." Her voice stayed level, but something raw moved beneath it. "I don't need a savior. I need respect. I need to do my job without becoming part of some story about what you own." Jim absorbed this, recognizing the truth in her words. He'd been protecting his interest, his space, his growing fascination. But in doing so, he'd made her position more precarious. "You're right," he said, finally. "I made it about me when it should have been about you." Sarah studied him, recalculating. "Why do you keep coming back?" "Because you're the first person in years who doesn't want anything from me." The honesty surprised them both. "You don't want my money, my power, my protection. You just want to be left alone to do your work well." "And that's attractive to you? Indifference?"
Authenticity is. He met her eyes, letting her see past the careful mask. Everything in my world is performance. You're the only real thing I encounter all day. Sarah's expression softened fractionally, understanding passing between them. Your world and mine can't mix, Mr. Park. One of us gets hurt. I know. He straightened, respecting the boundary she had drawn. But maybe we can coexist. Same tables, different tables. She nodded slowly, not agreement, but acknowledgement. As she moved past him toward the stairs, she paused. For what it's worth, thank you for intervening, even if I didn't need it. After she left, Jim remained in the cellar's coolness, understanding he'd crossed a line tonight. But he'd also learned something crucial. Sarah Johnson's strength came from within, unshakable and absolute, and that made her more dangerous to his carefully controlled heart than any rival gang ever could be.
The dining room held a different quality after midnight. Chairs upturned on tables, floors gleaming from fresh mopping, silence replacing the evening's carefully orchestrated symphony of conversation and cutlery. Sarah moved through the space with her clipboard, counting wine bottles and verifying inventory against the system. Third Thursday of the month, her least favorite shift. Staying late meant less sleep before her morning job started at 6. She sensed him before she saw him. Jim sat in the darkened bar area, a glass of something amber catching the emergency lighting's dim glow. Still in his white shirt, collar loosened, dragon tattoo fully visible now without the evening's crowds to perform for. "Shouldn't you be home?" she asked, not unkindly. "Probably." He gestured to the empty restaurant. "But I like it like this. Honest. No performance." Sarah resumed counting bottles, aware of his presence but not acknowledging it beyond professional courtesy. After a moment, curiosity overcame caution. "Do you always stay this late?" "Sometimes, when the penthouse feels too empty." He paused. "You work mornings too, don't you? I've seen the exhaustion you hide so well." She glanced at him sharply. "What makes you think—" "The way you drink coffee at shift start, like it's medicine, not pleasure." His observation was precise, not intrusive. "Where else do you work?" Sarah considered deflecting, maintaining the wall between them. But something about the silence, the absence of audience, made honesty feel safer. "Hotel breakfast service in Gangnam, 6 to noon, then here at 5. That's 17-hour days. 16, if I skip lunch." She marked something on her clipboard. "I'm saving for culinary school. Le Cordon Bleu has a campus here. 3 years, then I open my own place." Interest sparked in his eyes. "What kind of place?" "Soul food. Elevated." For the first time, real passion entered her voice. Not the kind that apologizes for itself or tries to be something it's not. Shrimp and grits that tastes like Charleston, oxtail that falls off the bone, peach cobbler that makes you remember home. She caught herself, realizing she'd revealed more than intended. It's just a dream. Dreams with specific plans are called goals. Jim stood, moving closer but maintaining respectful distance. "How much more do you need?" "Enough that I'll get there on my own terms." The boundary was clear. He nodded, understanding the lesson from the tip envelope. "Your restaurant, what will you call it?" "Johnson's Table." She said it like a prayer, like speaking it out loud made it real. Because everyone deserves a seat. Something shifted in Jim's expression. Not desire, exactly, but recognition. "That's beautiful. Generous. What about you?" The question surprised them both. "What do you want, Mr. Park, beyond all this?" She gestured at the restaurant, the empire it represented. Jim was quiet for a long moment, weighing truth against self-protection. Finally, "To matter to someone for who I am, not what I control. To have a conversation that isn't a negotiation." His voice dropped lower. "To feel something other than this hollow efficiency of power." The vulnerability in his admission hung between them, unexpected and raw. Sarah saw past the tattoos and tailored clothes to the isolation beneath. A man who commanded everything, but connected with nothing. "That's sad," she said softly. "Having everything and feeling empty. So is working yourself to exhaustion for a dream you're not sure you'll reach." "Maybe.
met each other's eyes, but at least I'm building towards something that's mine. They stood in the dim restaurant, two people from incompatible worlds acknowledging each other's lonely ambitions. The moment stretched, intimate without crossing lines, honest without demanding anything. "I should finish inventory," Sarah said finally, "and I should go home." Jim moved toward the door, then paused. "Your dream, Johnson's table. It will happen. I can see it." After he left, Sarah stood alone among the upturned chairs, his words echoing in the silence. For the first time, she'd seen Jim Park as something other than danger and wealth. She'd seen him as human, and that scared her more than his power ever could. The envelope arrived with the morning wine delivery, addressed to Sarah in precise handwriting. Inside, a check for 40 million won and a single card embossed with Jim's name. No message, just the amount. Exactly enough to cover Le Cordon Bleu's tuition with some left over for living expenses. Sarah found him in his office during the afternoon lull, before dinner service began. The check lay on his desk between them like evidence of a crime. "I can't accept this." Jim looked up from his laptop, unsurprised by her presence or her tone. "Why not? You work 2 jobs for this exact amount. I'm simply accelerating your timeline." "You're buying me." She kept her voice level, professional, despite the anger simmering beneath. "Buying my gratitude, my debt, my obligation." "I'm investing in talent." He leaned back, studying her. "Consider it a scholarship." "Scholarships come with applications and criteria. This comes with expectations." Sarah crossed her arms. "What happens when I accept, when I owe you 40 million won worth of gratitude? What do you expect in return?" "Nothing." "Everyone wants something, Mr. Park, especially men with power." She met his eyes, unflinching. "What happens when I finish school and you decide to collect? When nothing becomes just dinner, becomes just one night, becomes something I never agreed to?" The accusation hit its mark. Jim's jaw tightened, recognition and frustration warring across his features. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" She leaned forward slightly, pressing the advantage. "Charity? Pity for the poor girl working herself to exhaustion? Because I don't need either. I need to build something that's mine, earned by my own hands." "It's respect," he said, voice sharper now. "Recognition that you're wasting your talent serving other people's food when you should be creating your own. I have resources, you have need. Why is that so difficult to accept?" "Because accepting makes me yours." The words hung between them, weighted with implications neither had spoken aloud until now. "The moment I take that check, I'm no longer Sarah Johnson working toward her own dream. I become Sarah Johnson, the girl Jim Park sponsors. The girl who owes him, the girl who can't say no when he finally asks for what he really wants." Jim stood abruptly, frustration breaking through his usual control. "What I want is to help you without these complications. What I want is for you to achieve your dream faster. Is that so terrible?" "Yes, when it comes with invisible strings." Sarah's voice softened slightly, acknowledging his genuine intention beneath the problematic execution. "You think you're being generous. You probably are by your world standards, but in mine, this is how powerful men own women without ever having to force anything. They just make us dependent. I would never. You wouldn't have to." Sarah picked up the check, held it between them. "I'd do it to myself. I'd start justifying small compromises. He paid for my education, the least I can do is have dinner with him. Then, he's been so generous I can't hurt his feelings. Until one day I'm standing exactly where he wants me, and I got there by my own choices." She set the check back on his desk with finality. "I won't do that to myself." The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken truths. Jim saw her clearly now, not just her strength but the painful wisdom behind it. How many times had she watched other women make those small compromises? How many times had she been offered help that came with hidden prices? "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "You're right. I didn't think about how it would feel from your position." Sarah nodded, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "I know you meant well. That's what makes it dangerous."
They stood across his desk, the space between them charged with more than anger now. Attraction acknowledged but not acted upon. Respect earned through conflict rather than compromise. Jim saw her self-possession as something rare and precious. Sarah saw his frustrated care as genuine but impossible to accept. For what it's worth, she moved toward the door, I believe you didn't want anything in return, but you would have, eventually. Everyone does. After she left, Jim tore the check in half, understanding that some people couldn't be helped without being diminished, and that made him want her more, not as possession, but as equal, which was the one thing his world made impossible.
The hostilities started small. A complaint about water temperature, a request for a different server because the previous one seemed distracted. By the third week after the check incident, Sarah had been reassigned from 3 of her regular tables, all wealthy women who suddenly found fault with service that had been flawless for months. The actress with perfect cheekbones returned with 2 friends, all designer labels and cold smiles. They sat in Sarah's section deliberately, ordering complicated drinks and sending them back repeatedly. Too sweet, too strong, not cold enough. Each return trip to the bar another small humiliation performed for an audience of envious observers. She thinks she's special, Sarah overheard one of them say, voice pitched to Carrie. Playing hard to get with a man who could have anyone. It's embarrassing to watch. Sarah refilled their water glasses with steady hands, face composed, refusing to give them the reaction they wanted. But the words burrowed beneath her professional armor, finding the vulnerable places she'd thought well protected. In the kitchen, the atmosphere had shifted too. The line cooks who'd once joked with her during pickup now went silent when she approached. The sous chef checked her orders with excessive scrutiny, questioning modifications she'd made 100 times before. Only the head chef remained neutral, his focus on food transcending the restaurant's social dynamics. You need to be careful. Min-so, the hostess, caught her arm during a rare quiet moment. She was older, had worked at the Golden Phoenix since before Jim took over, and her eyes held worried knowledge. Women who get too close to Jim Park disappear, not violently, just vanish, transfer to other locations, leave the industry, move back to their hometowns. He doesn't do it directly, but his world has a way of removing complications. Sarah pulled her arm free gently. I'm not trying to get close to him. I know, that's what makes this worse. Min-so glanced toward the dining room where Jim sat at his usual table, watching everything with those calculating eyes. You're not playing the game, which makes you interesting, and being interesting to him is the most dangerous thing you can be. The warning echoed through the remaining shifts that week. She noticed how other servers avoided her section even when it was slammed, how the bartender took longer with her drink orders, how the sommelier stopped making recommendations, forcing her to navigate the wine list alone while anxious customers waited. Through it all, Sarah maintained her composure. Perfect posture, controlled smile, flawless service despite the mounting obstacles. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break, wouldn't prove their assumptions right by complaining or crying or running to Jim for protection. But Jim noticed everything. She felt his attention like pressure against her skin, saw the subtle tension in his jaw when the actress sent back her 3rd cocktail, watched his hands tightened around his whiskey glass when a table requested a different server specifically to exclude her. One evening, he appeared in the service station as she was entering orders, his presence instantly silencing the 2 servers who'd been discussing her loud enough to be heard. Is there a problem? His voice carried quiet menace, question directed at the room rather than anyone specific. No, Mr. Park, they stammered. They fled quickly, leaving Sarah alone with him in the narrow space. You don't have to endure this, he said, something fierce moving beneath his controlled exterior. One word from me and it stops. Sarah turned to face him fully, seeing both his genuine concern and the impossibility it represented. And what would that word be? She's mine, leave her alone? That would only make it worse, confirm everything they believe about why you notice me.
Then what do you want me to do? Frustration leaked through his careful control. Watch them tear you apart? Yes, the word was simple, absolute. Because the alternative is you fighting my battles, which makes me your responsibility instead of my own person. She held his gaze. I can handle this. What I can't handle is becoming someone who needs you to survive. The truth of it settled between them, his desire to protect her directly opposed to what she needed most, autonomy. Jim nodded slowly, understanding and hating the wisdom in her words. As he left, Sarah leaned against the counter, allowing herself one moment of exhaustion before straightening her spine and returning to the battlefield of the dining room.
The rooftop terrace wasn't officially for staff, but everyone used it anyway during the brief windows between shifts when management wasn't watching. Sarah pushed through the heavy door into Seoul's night air, the city spreading below like a constellation of ambitions and broken dreams. The Golden Phoenix sat high enough that the street noise became abstract, distant, just a low hum beneath the wind. She leaned against the railing, letting the cold metal bite through her uniform, grounding her. Below, people moved through their lives, unaware of the small war being waged in an upscale restaurant, unaware that she was losing ground daily, that her careful professionalism was being weaponized against her by women who saw her as competition in a contest she'd never entered. I thought I might find you here. Sarah didn't turn at Jim's voice, too tired to maintain the performance of surprise. Don't you have an empire to run? It runs itself, mostly. He moved to stand beside her, careful to maintain distance, both of them staring out at the city rather than at each other. That's the problem with building efficient systems. They don't need you. Must be lonely. It is. The admission was simple, unguarded. Watching you endure what's happening down there, watching you refuse my help, that's lonely too. Sarah finally looked at him, seeing the tension in his jaw, the way his tattooed hands gripped the railing. What do you want from me, Jim? She used his first name deliberately, stripping away the formality that had always protected them both. Really want. He turned to face her fully, and she saw something raw in his expression, vulnerability he usually buried beneath control and calculation. I want conversations like this, real ones, without the performance. I want to know what makes you laugh, what you dream about beyond the restaurant. I want... He paused, searching for words. I want to matter to someone who doesn't need me for anything. You matter to lots of people. They need my power, my protection, my money. His voice carried quiet desperation. You're the only person who sees me as just a man, probably because you wish you didn't have to see me at all. The truth of it hung between them. Sarah did wish she could see him as just another customer, just another obstacle between her and her goals, but she'd glimpsed too much. His isolation, his hunger for authenticity, the careful loneliness he carried like armor. I can't be another beautiful thing you own, another piece in your collection, the interesting bartender, the fascinating artist, the exotic... Don't. The word was sharp, almost pained. Don't reduce what I feel to that. Then what is it? She stepped closer, challenging. What am I to you? The only real thing in my world. He reached toward her face, hesitated, his hand hovering near her cheek with devastating gentleness. Jim. His name was barely a whisper. He leaned closer, giving her time to retreat, to rebuild the walls, but she didn't move, caught in the gravity of this moment, this man, this impossible situation. His lips were inches from hers when reality crashed back. Sarah pulled sharply, stepping back until the railing pressed against her spine. We can't. Why not? His voice was rough, hands still reaching for her. Because your world and mine can't mix. Someone always gets hurt. She wrapped her arms around herself, protective. And it won't be you. Men like you, powerful, connected, protected, you walk away from collateral damage. But me? No. I'm the one who disappears, who loses her job, her reputation, her dream. I'm the one who becomes a cautionary tale. He absorbed this, the truth of it settling like lead in his chest.
I would never let that happen. You couldn't stop it. Sarah's voice was gentle now, almost pitying. That's what you don't understand. Your protection is part of the problem. The moment I need you, I lose myself. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and the distant promise of storms. They stood on opposite sides of an unbridgeable divide, him with his power and loneliness, her with her dreams and dignity, both wanting something the other couldn't give without destroying what made it valuable. I should go, Sarah said finally, moving toward the door. Sarah. She paused, but didn't turn. I'm sorry, for both of us. The door closed behind her, leaving Jim alone with the city's indifferent lights and the ghost of almost touch still burning on his fingertips.
They arrived during the Friday dinner rush, when the Golden Phoenix was at its most elegant, most vulnerable. 3 men in dark suits moving through the dining room with purpose that didn't match the atmosphere. Sarah noticed them first, the way other diners shifted unconsciously away, the sudden tension in their body language that spoke of danger recognized at a primal level. She was carrying a tray of desserts when the lead man stopped at Jim's table. Not a request, not a greeting, just presence, heavy and threatening. We need to talk, now. The man's voice carried enough to turn nearby heads. Your territory dispute in Itaewon has consequences. Jim's expression didn't change, but Sarah saw his hand move subtly toward his jacket. Not here. Private room. I think here is fine. The man smiled without warmth. Let everyone see what happens when Jim Park forgets his place. The temperature in the dining room dropped. Sarah watched Jim stand slowly, controlled violence in every movement. His security detail materialized from their strategic positions, but the rival gang had brought their own. The elegant restaurant transformed into a chessboard of armed men pretending to be civilized. Private room, Jim repeated, voice soft as silk over steel, or I empty this dining room and handle you where my customers eat. The standoff lasted 3 heartbeats before the rival gang leader nodded once. They moved toward the private dining room, Jim's security following, and Sarah found herself trailing behind, unable to look away from the unfolding disaster. She shouldn't have followed, should have stayed in the safe, ignorant space of the main dining room, but something, fear, curiosity, or the terrible need to see the truth, pulled her forward. The private room's door didn't close completely. Through the gap, Sarah saw everything. The negotiation lasted less than a minute before it erupted. The rival leader threw the first punch, sloppy, telegraphed, born of frustration rather than skill. Jim moved like water, like violence given form. His counterstrike broke the man's nose with a crack that echoed in Sarah's chest. Blood sprayed across white tablecloth, across Jim's pristine shirt, across the careful illusion of civilization he'd maintained. Then it was chaos. Security against gang members, the private room transforming into a contained battlefield. But Jim was something else entirely. Every movement precise, economical, brutal. He broke bones with the same efficiency he'd used to order wine. The dragon tattoo on his neck seemed to pulse with each strike, no longer decoration but declaration. This was what it meant. This was who he really was. Sarah watched him slam a man's face into the table once, twice, 3 times until the wood cracked and the man went limp. Watched him twist another's arm until something snapped and screaming filled the air. His face remained calm throughout, almost serene, a man doing familiar work without emotion or hesitation. When it ended, 5 men lay broken on the floor. Jim stood in the center of the carnage, blood on his hands, his shirt, his face. He turned toward the door and saw her there, frozen in the threshold. Their eyes met across the wreckage. Sarah saw recognition in his expression, then resignation. Not surprise, he'd known this moment would come, known she would eventually see the monster beneath the elegant exterior, known the truth would destroy whatever fragile connection they'd built. Sarah? His voice carried something she'd never heard before, not quite pleading, but close. She backed away, shaking her head. The carefully maintained distance between violence and civility had shattered, revealing the truth she'd always suspected, but never wanted to confirm.
Jim Park wasn't a businessman who occasionally dealt with danger. He was danger itself, dressed in expensive clothes and pretending at humanity. "I can't." The words caught in her throat. She turned and fled, her blood-stained image burning behind her eyes. Behind her, Jim stood among the broken men and broken furniture, watching the only real thing in his world disappear. He'd known she would leave the moment she saw him clearly, had known from the beginning that authenticity came with unbearable costs. The restaurant's elegant facade had cracked, and so had whatever possibility had existed between them.
Sarah's resignation letter sat on Jim's desk for 3 days before he finally read it. 2 sentences, professionally composed, offering 2 weeks' notice. He found her in the service station during the afternoon lull, the letter in his hand like evidence of everything they'd lost. "Don't do this." She continued rolling silverware into napkins, hands steady despite the tension crackling between them. "It's already done." "Sarah." He moved closer and she finally looked up. Her eyes held no anger, just exhausted certainty. "One incident doesn't define everything." "It wasn't an incident, Jim. It was truth." She set down the silverware carefully. "I can't serve tables knowing what's happening in the back rooms. Can't smile at customers while wondering which ones are part of your world. Can't pretend that blood washes off as easily as you think it does. I protected this place, protected you." "I know." Her voice was gentle, devastatingly so. "That's what makes it impossible. Your protection requires violence. Your world runs on fear and broken bones. And I can't—" She paused, searching for words. "I can't be adjacent to that anymore. I can't normalize it just because the man wielding it is lonely." The truth of it settled between them, final as a closed door. Jim saw no path forward that didn't require one of them to compromise something fundamental. She couldn't accept his world. He couldn't leave it. "I understand," he said quietly, the words costing him more than any negotiation ever had. Sarah nodded once, returning to her silverware. The conversation was over. They were over, before they'd ever really begun. 4 months passed like water through cupped hands, present, then gone, leaving only the echo of what they'd held. The Golden Phoenix continued its elegant performance, new servers replacing Sarah's absence with competent efficiency that somehow emphasized the emptiness. Jim sat at his corner table again, surrounded by the same desperate women, the same careful negotiations, the same hollow victory of power without meaning. Everything felt muted now, colors less vibrant, food less flavorful. He'd built an empire that suddenly felt like an elaborate cage. The invitation arrived in thick cream paper, hand-delivered by a courier who waited for no response. Simple, elegant design. Johnson's table, grand opening, in script that managed to be both sophisticated and warm. An address in Hongdae, far from his territory, in a neighborhood that thrived on art and authenticity rather than power and fear. Jim stood outside the small restaurant on a Thursday evening, Seoul's autumn air carrying the scent of rain and possibility. Through the windows he saw everything his world lacked: exposed brick walls decorated with local art, mismatched furniture that somehow created cohesion, people laughing with genuine joy rather than calculated networking. And Sarah, behind a small open kitchen, cooking with the same focused grace she'd once used to serve his tables. The space was perfect. Warm where the Golden Phoenix was cold, authentic where his empire was performance. This was what she'd built from 17-hour days and refused checks, something entirely hers, unmarked by compromise. He almost left, almost respected the boundaries she'd drawn by simply observing from outside. But then she looked up, gaze finding him through the glass as if she'd been expecting him all along. She nodded once, not quite invitation, but acknowledgement, permission maybe, or simply curiosity about what he'd become in their months apart. Inside, the scent of soul food elevated to art form, oxtail braised until it fell from bone, collard greens with just enough vinegar, cornbread that managed to be both rustic and refined. Sarah emerged from the kitchen, white apron over jeans, natural hair framing her face, looking more herself than she ever had in uniform. "You came." She gestured to a small table near the window. "Sit, I'll bring you something." "Sarah, let me cook for you first.
Then we'll talk. What she brought was poetry on a plate. Shrimp and grits that tasted like home for someone who'd never had one. Collards that carried generations of wisdom in every bite. Sweet tea that balanced hospitality and defiance. He ate slowly, tasting not just food, but freedom, authenticity, the courage it took to build something beautiful in a city that rewarded power over truth. And when she sat across from him, 2 small glasses in hand, 1 sweet tea, 1 soju, her expression was carefully neutral. Why did you invite me? Because you were right about one thing. She slid the soju toward him, kept the tea for herself. Your world is your world. Mine is mine. They can't merge without one of us disappearing. But maybe, she paused, considering, maybe sometimes we can meet in the middle. Intersections, not invasions. Jim picked up the soju, understanding the symbolism. Her world and his, represented in glasses they wouldn't exchange. What does that look like? Honest conversations, occasional dinners here or somewhere neutral, no obligations, no expectations, no pretending you're someone you're not, or that I can accept who you are. She raised her tea glass slightly. Just 2 people who see past the performance. That's all? The question carried weight, longing and loss and the recognition that sometimes all was more than most people ever found. It's more than I give anyone else, she smiled slightly, sad but genuine, and more than you probably deserve. But life's short, Jim, and authentic connection is rare. He raised his soju glass to meet her tea. The gentle clink resonated with promise, fragile as spun glass and stronger than any contract he'd ever signed. They drank in silence, acknowledging the impossibility and choosing hope anyway. Outside, Seoul's lights blazed against the darkness. Inside Johnson's table, 2 people from incompatible worlds sat across separate drinks at a shared table, building something unnamed in the space between their carefully maintained boundaries. Not romance, not partnership, just the rare, precious truth of being seen and choosing to see in return. It wasn't everything, but it was real. And for both of them, that was enough.